You are destined for great and unfortunate things.
The shadow of Rome is vast, and you will yet die under it to the roar.
You are destined for great and unfortunate things.
The shadow of Rome is vast, and you will yet die under it to the roar of the crowd.
Why are you here?
Because I trusted in the honor of a Roman.
You have a woman.
Taken from me when I was captured.
I see things in men that they themselves have lost. I give it breath until it ignites. How many men would you kill to hold your wife again?
I would kill them all.
Gladiator does not fear death.
Gladiators' virtues extend beyond the arena. As lovers, they're said to be ravenous beasts.
Make him do it again.
I swear to be burned, chained, beaten, or die by the sword. They cheer for blood, and they shall have it.
A man must accept his fate, or be destroyed by it.
Thank you very much for tuning in with us once again on a Sunday. I've had a bit of a hectic day today. Nearly wasn't sure if I was going to be able to do this stream until the last minute, so you'll have to forgive me. I've got my usual panel of guests. It's going to be interesting talking about this one because I feel like episode 3 is really where the show starts finding its feet and you get a sense of who all the players are. Has it endeared itself to everyone who's watched it? Well, we're going to find out. History Bro is with us.
Hey, can you hear me okay?
I can, sir. Good to see you. And pleased to have you back on board. And I'm glad you're prepared to put yourself through more pain in order to give us your thoughts on the show. And I've read almost all of Plutarch now. So
You want the life of Crassus?
Yeah. Very interesting document.
Right.
Really, it's...
Yeah, I've got my well-thumbed copy here, actually. I think maybe I'll read a passage or two from it.
Yeah, because I was tempted to do that myself, and then I thought, actually, no, that's your job. So, yeah, please do. And it's interesting to see what people have extrapolated about Spartacus from, I guess 4 or 5 paragraphs essentially, and then there's a couple of other sources as well. But it's interesting. Obviously, one has to embellish. Talking of embellishment, the man who embellishes whiskey every day. It's Blue Collar Loser. How you doing, sir?
Yeah, what's like you're saying? When I was watching this and I was making stills, I'm like, you know what? I am curious on Bro's take on it because I do agree. I do think this is better than the first 2, but I mean, if he has criticisms, I want to hear it. But 3 and 4, I don't know. I'm thinking they're better than 1 and 2.
Yeah, no, they are. Well, in my view, I agree. We've also got Leroy Peters in the house, who's a big fan of the show. Thanks for coming back, Leroy. How you doing?
Thank you. And I just want to say, History Bro, it's an honor to meet you from one fellow historian to another. After Lance does his spiel, I would like to ask you some questions about Spartacus. So,
well, we may get to that during the stream. Leroy's an ex-serviceman himself and has a massive personal interest in the history of the American West. So that's his specialty. Anyway, but today we're going to be talking about ancient Rome. So we're going to get right into it on this gorgeous warm day in the UK. It's not very often I can say that. This is a episode of a lot of, well, we're going to talk about them collectively together, 3 and 4. Let me just run through the plot synopsis briefly, and we'll embellish some of the story elements in more detail when we get to those relevant sections. and I haven't done half as much of my PR for tonight as I did last week, which is why our viewing figures are so tiny right now. But I'll do a few more posts as we go along. But it may interest you guys to know that actually the stream we did on this last week had the highest number of views in the fastest time on my channel in quite a while.
That guy right there is why.
Yeah, it went over 500 within sort of like 20 minutes or something. So clearly everybody was keen to hear what History Bro had to say about Spartacus.
This show's a documentary. Come on.
Yeah. So must be that big fan club. Anyway, all right. So episode 3 is called Legends. Episode 4 is rather aptly named The Thing of the Pit. So I'm just going to read out the synopsis here. As the gladiators prepare for the series of fights that will be the highlight of the upcoming Vulcanalia festival. This is in Capua, of course, which is a town not that far southwest of Rome. Spartacus clearly maneuvers to secure the right to battle Crixus, the unbeaten champion of Capua. They both train in the same ludus, of course, and Spartacus is kind of a rival to Crixus, so this is his mission. Despite his wife Lucretia's objections, Batiatus, this is the man who's head of the ludus, the domina, reminds her that Spartacus's bravery and previous exploits have struck a chord with the public's interest. And of course, the public in the arena are a bit like the live internet of the day. So if you feel you're winning over the public, that's very, very important in Roman times. And I'm sure we'll come back to that. Meanwhile, Lucretia schemes to win favor with the wife of Gaius Claudius Glaber and the crafty, devious Lilithia, I think that's how you pronounce her name, who is kind of Glaber's love interest. At the pre-fight banquet, if you can call it that, she expresses her interest and desires over Crixus, although he in turn is secretly enamored with Navia, one of the domestic slaves who works at the ludus. At the Vulcania Games, Spartacus embarrasses owners publicly, both by beginning to fight too early and by surrendering instead of dying. And it's quite surprising that Batiatus suggests he should live, whereas his wife, Lucretia, really wants to see him dead. So quite a lot going on, particularly with the various characters that work at the ludus. You're really introduced to all the people, both slaves and people in the higher echelons, as well as the different gladiators that work there. Then we come to the next episode, which is a very different animal altogether. The Thing in the Pit. Spartacus, his disgrace at the surrendering to Crixus in the arena leads Batiatus to punish him by demoting the Thracian to fight in the pits of the underworld, a hellish, vicious subterranean battle arena where the crowds are frenzied and anything goes, a bit like cockfights in South America, basically, but with people. When Navia seemingly rejects Crixus' necklace gift, he initially misunderstands the reason for her refusal and continues his secretive sexual relationship with the wife of Batiatus, who's actually hoping to get a child by sleeping with him, because as of yet we have discovered they've not been able to have any children, and she suspects her husband might be the problem. Meanwhile, the drought that is infecting Capua is causing Batiatus money problems, and Lucretia ends up selling her new emerald necklace at a loss in the markets. There's a great scene with Salonius where he tries to intervene, and we can see that he has desires on Batiatus's wife. He loves her clearly, and she hates him. She despises him. Spartacus goes through a series of fights in the pits, extremely violent. Somehow he manages to survive, and then it's set up for him to do a particular fight a certain way, and Batiatus stands to win a huge sum of money. However, unfortunately, that goes wrong. Batiatus loses everything, but he regains favor by helping to foil an assassination attempt by 2 slaves and is restored again to gladiator status, much to the frustration of Lucretia, the wife of Batiatus. there's also Barker, one of the gladiators, who is kind of Batiatus's bodyguard, and he only spotted one of the assassins, so he's also kind of disgraced in that episode. So quite a lot happens in episodes 3 and 4. But do we feel it's recapturing the history or not?
Gladiator does not fear death.
Gladiators' virtues extend beyond the arena. As love.
So history, bro. I guess one of the things I want to ask you is, do we know, did these fighting pits, did they actually exist in Rome or anywhere else in Roman times? I mean, is there anything about them in writings anywhere?
Not that I've ever read. Now, although my undergrad is in classical civilizations or ancient history, and I did focus on the late Republic and the early Empire, I wouldn't say I've read everything there is to read, although but I've done a vast amount of reading about it, and most of my adult life I've read about it. I've never heard anything of the sort. But that's not to say they didn't exist, or there might be an account somewhere in some obscure writings that I haven't read. So yeah, I mean, it's like a bit like Fight Club, isn't it? But to the death.
I mean, I think
so. I can imagine things like that may well have happened, but someone like Appian or Cassius Dio never describes anything like that I've read. But I could be wrong. Someone out there who's a professional classicist might disagree. and might say, "Oh no, here's a passage." Well, if they do find it, let me know. I'd be interested to look that up.
I mean, I suppose what you're saying is it's certainly plausible. It's within the believable realms of the historical fiction that we're presenting.
Just about. Yeah. I mean, who knows? So one of the things I think I mentioned last time, which I think bears stressing, is how scant the sources are.
Yeah.
Some people might think that that we know a fantastic amount about the ancient world. Well, it just so happens that the late Republic and the age of Augustus, or the age of Christ, around the turn of the BC AD era, is actually one of the much more well documented in literary terms, much more well documented than lots of other periods of the ancient world, and it's still pretty scanty. If I give you an idea of if you've read Plutarch, Cassius's life, Plutarch, you get, what is it, like 3-4 sides, a couple of thousand words, and that's it. That's it. There's no mention of some pit, some Fight Club style pit. that's certainly not that Spartacus ever went to. There's no mention, other than one or two exceptions, of the other people in Batiatus's gladiator school. Batiatus himself is mentioned once by name, once. So, nothing about his wife, nothing about their sexual dalliances, nothing at all. There's nothing there. But to say again, this is still one of the better documented periods. If you go forward in time, 200, 300 years, we've got even less. It just so happens there's this thing that historians talk about, the light of history,
right?
The spotlight of history. And quite often it's a bit out of vogue these days, but people used to talk about the Dark Ages being after the Roman Empire fell in the 5th century AD. People don't really, it's a bit out of, let's say, it's not very fashionable to talk of the Dark Ages anymore. But what was meant by that was that the literary sources dry up. There's not many historians' writings from the time that survive to us. However, this period, we've got 4 or 5. And we've got a whole life of Plutarch. Remarkable, really, that we can read the words of someone that was writing, 1900 years ago, 1900 years or near, because Plutarch was living during the age of Trajan. Well, he was probably writing during the age of Trajan, which is like 200 years after this. Remember, the Third Servile War, the Spartacan Revolt, is supposed to be 71, 72 BC. Plutarch's writing in like the 110s AD. It's the best part of 200 years later. So it's like me writing about the Napoleonic Wars.
Right.
So bear that in mind. Even if Plutarch says something, you still have to be a little bit careful. He wasn't there. It was long out of living memory. He couldn't speak to anyone who actually lived through it. He's just using sources, just like you or I might read about the Napoleonic War and then write our own version of it, it's secondhand straight away, if not third hand. So there you go. The history is much more scanty than I think a lot of people think. When you watch a show like this, you think everyone in it is a historical figure. No, hardly anyone is. Hardly anyone is.
I mean, that it's good to hear, and also, you know, remind ourselves that the source, that even the main source, Plutarch, that gave an account of Spartacus and his brief history, is from someone who wasn't alive at that time. So is effectively a historian of that time. Yeah, exactly. Like you said, researching for a book or whatever in the same way that you or I would do now, except with considerably less access to the internet. And so I mean,
Leroy wants to say something.
Yeah, Leroy, jump in.
Yes. Also, I want to piggyback on what History Bro was saying, because I was a history major, so I don't consider myself a historian. I'm probably an amateur compared to you, History Bro. So the first time I heard about Spartacus was when I was a child, and that was when the movie starring Kirk Douglas came out.
Sure.
After I saw that movie, I looked up Spartacus in the World Book, because I used to have World Book encyclopedias growing up. And anytime I would see a historical movie like Spartacus or Braveheart, I would look up after seeing it, I would look them up in the encyclopedia. This was before we even had the internet. So, to piggyback on what you were saying, History Bro, and I have some questions. First and foremost, even though this show is not quote unquote historically accurate, and this is just my opinion, I think it's more historically accurate compared to the Kirk Douglas version. And with that being said, also, we have to remember, and to quote Angus McFadden from Braveheart, history was written by those who've hanged heroes. And what I mean by that is that when I remember when I was in high school, I did a research on Spartacus, and mostly from Wikipedia, encyclopedias, and other books on the Roman Empire. And later in life, I find that as far as historical documents on Spartacus and the rebellion he led for 3 years, there's only, and history world, please correct me if I'm wrong, there's only at least 2,500 documented written sources on Spartacus, and most of them are told from the Roman point of view. In other words, they're not unbiased. Does that sound correct, History Bro?
Yeah, I don't know what you mean by 2,500 sources. I mean, there's like 5 sources. I'm not sure what you meant.
I mean probably 2,500 writings, or
maybe you mean 2,500 words.
Right, yeah. I mean, there's primary, there's what's called primary sources, aren't there? Primary material and secondary material. So a lot has been written about Spartacus since. But in terms of primary sources, i.e. the ancient historians, people writing in the ancient world. So quick note on that, which I find interesting, because this is really my wheelhouse, really. It's actually what I did at undergrad was I didn't actually do classics. I did ancient history. Most people wouldn't think there's any difference between those two things. But what mine is a bit more technical. You actually study the histories themselves rather than the literary analysis of what the historians say. You end up doing both, of course. But so something to say. So the best, as Lance says, the best source is Plutarch. And so, but we don't know what sources Plutarch was using. So like I say, the events were 200 years, a little less, than when Plutarch was writing. So as I say, it's like me talking about the life of Pitt the Younger or something. But Plutarch never says, I was using this source, I spoke to this person who's the grandson of this person who actually was there. Occasionally, very, very occasionally, you get that in the ancient historians. But Plutarch doesn't do any of that. But what we do know, or what we can infer, is that Plutarch would have had access to all sorts of archives. He would have had access to the Imperial Roman archives, but he doesn't say exactly what they were or who he's using, who he's leaving out. But a great point you did make, Leroy, is that it, of course, is biased. It is the Roman perspective. And talking about Plutarch more generally is his angle, if you like, what we might today call his angle, his take, his bias. And his bias is fairly pro-Roman. Now, that's quite odd to not say that it's just completely pro-Roman. A lot of people think, well, if you take an ancient Greek historian like Herodotus or Thucydides, they're going to be pro-Greek. If you take ancient Roman historian like Tacitus or Suetonius or Plutarch, they're going to be pro-Roman. Well, it's not actually the case. In the example of Tacitus, for example, he's very, very often extremely rude and scathing about the Romans, his own people, about his own culture and civilization. Polybius isn't. He's over the top pro-Roman. He's always trying to put the rosiest glow on Romanness at all times. Well, Plutarch's somewhere in between, which is interesting to note. He when the Romans sort of quite clearly do something that's immoral or evil or something, he'll sort of say so in passing. And when they have a ridiculously brilliant victory in some way, he won't go on and on and on about it. He's sort of somewhere in the middle, Plutarch.
All right.
But yeah, so it is interesting. And that is the job of the ancient historian, not the classicist, but the actual ancient historian. It's the job to sort of tease out those things. You know, where is Plutarch coming from? Where was his headspace when he was writing this?
Right.
And one other thing, just to mention again, or perhaps to stress, is that he's writing in the age of Trajan. Now, the age of Trajan, like the 110s or the 100s AD into the sort of the 110s AD, was something of a mini golden age for Rome, if you like. They'd had some really bad times, to put it mildly, under the likes of Nero, or in the year of the 4 emperors, when there was some sort of civil war. But by the age of Trajan, they're enjoying a spectacular string of endless victories. That's the headline about Trajan, is wherever he goes in the empire, he just can't stop winning, like Alexander the Great. So they're at sort of the Roman world is a bit of a high point, a very confident high point when Plutarch is writing. So that's another thing to sort of bear in mind. So they can look back on something like Spartacus as, you know, phew, that was something a bit like Napoleon almost invading England 200 years ago, but didn't. We can look back on that and be like, almost laugh about it, almost like, nice try. You know, nice shit. You had a shot and you screwed it up. Yeah, nice try. And we can look back at almost laughing about it. But at the time, and Plutarch does say this actually in the Life of Crassus, at the time, it was there would have been an extreme level of anxiety and fear. Spartacus was something like a mini Hannibal or Brennus, if you know the story of Brennus, even earlier than Hannibal.
I never heard of Brennus, but I know who Hannibal is.
Right, a guy that comes down into Italy and could quite easily sack Rome. A couple of times, there's no armies between Hannibal and Rome, or between Spartacus's army or rabble, whatever you want to call them, and Rome. So it's like an existential threat. A couple of times, small windows of time where the Roman establishment were extremely worried and scared what Spartacus was going to do.
Here's what I find amazing on the life of Spartacus, both the historical Spartacus, and even in this first season of Spartacus Blood and Sand. And even though I admit that this first season is not historically accurate pertaining to the life of Spartacus, one thing that is accurate is that we didn't see in the Kirk Douglas one is that there's a rivalry between Spartacus and Crixus and other gladiators, because they were of different culture and different language, and everyone had their own agenda and stuff like that. But what I found amazing is, and this is like around the time after I saw the Kirk Douglas Spartacus, when I was young, I looked him up in the encyclopedia. What I found amazing is that despite their differences, he led an army of 70 to 90,000 escaped slaves and was a thorn in the side of the Roman Empire for 3 years. And he was basically undefeated when it came to fighting and defeating the Romans. And it's amazing, like, you don't even get along with each other, but yet when it comes to Romans, you all managed to come together and basically kick some ass for 3 years. I mean, is that fair to say, or?
Well, it's accurate up until the point they got defeated, I think.
When you read Plutarch, actually it seems like you can again glean from it that Spartacus did have a tough time keeping them all together. It's certainly true that they were some sort of polyglot of different nations. There's in Plutarch, he mentions there's a German contingent, there's a Gaulish contingent, and there's lots of Thracians. That's just for beginners. But they don't. he does struggle to keep them together. Loads of times there's examples of when they don't follow his orders. They don't do as they're asked or told.
And we see that in the final season, War of the Damned.
Right,
Yeah, I mean, well, we're not there yet, so let's not get ahead of ourselves. But I mean, I think they're probably more united overall in the TV series than they were in reality. But the later seasons are quite interesting to analyze for that. They're much more about the battles and less about the orgies and the political backstabbery, which you get in season 1 in particular.
But history, bro, and I have no reason to doubt what you just said. But
that's why he's here. So Leroy, if I can put you on pause for a second.
Yes, I'm sorry, man. I don't mean to take.
All right. No, it's good. So I know you're excited.
Blue collar, you haven't said anything, so let
the enthusiasm is always good.
Actually, I want to hear.
I need to welcome Inside Man, who warned me he was running late, but is now here.
Good evening. Sorry about that. Apologies, everybody.
How you doing, Inside Man?
I'm very good. Thank you. How are you?
Blessed. Now that we're talking about a subject I'm very familiar with.
So you'll be more familiar with it by tonight. Anyway, let's refocus on the television show for a sec. So again, in terms of we can only guess really, like, because you said, Leroy, for example, you feel this is more accurate than the Kirk Douglas one. I would agree on several levels. One, in terms of just how casually indifferent the slaves are treated is even more accurate in this TV show. The fact that we get the sex and the nudity that we get is also more realistic, whether you want it in the show or not. It's also very violent, but the show gets away with it because it's that graphic novel, very over stylized sort of comic book violence, where
also, I think it gets away with it because it's based on historical reality. If you know anything about the Roman Empire, especially during this time, the Romans were highly immoral.
I'm aware it's a realistic depiction. That's what I'm saying. It's, I mean, if anything, they were probably even more violent than we'll see here. All kinds of shit went on. And I'm having a good.
Both were actually based on something else, as you quite rightly said. This is based on a graphic novel, but the movie Spartacus was also based on a book, which again was an interpretation. I think it was written in the 1950s. I think it was about 51, 52, something like that. I know it was post World War II. And of course the writer apparently was one of those writers that was blacklisted, the same as Dalton Trumbo.
That's the writer of the screenplay Spartacus,
I know Dalton Trumbo was, but also I believe the writer of the author of the novel as well was.
Why were they blacklisted?
Because of the
communist leanings, apparently.
Hunt for the Communists in Hollywood. He was one of the people that was named. Dalton Trumbo. There's a whole movie made about him. So he had to write the Spartacus script under another name, and he was given that job because he hadn't worked for months. And it was.
But also, he was imprisoned. He was actually one of the famous, the Big Ten, wasn't he? That was actually jailed for it. He was actually put in prison for it, for not revealing any further names.
Wasn't it?
So he was a communist then.
He wasn't necessarily a communist, although he was a card-carrying communist.
I think he was a communist.
So he was a communist then.
He was a
communist tourist. I don't think.
He was. He wasn't quite what we would deem to be a communist. He was more of somebody that decided that he was going to carry a little, hold that little bit of a beacon for communism, even though. He wasn't kind of a full-blown, blood and thunder, from the pulpit type communist. But
Stalinist.
He wasn't a Stalinist. No.
It's funny. I found out that Karl Marx, the founder of communism, mentions Spartacus as one of his heroes.
Exactly. Yes, you're right. You're spot on. Yeah.
And I personally would like to thank whoever wrote because like I said, I never even heard of Spartacus until I saw the movie starring Kirk Douglas. Then I looked him up in the encyclopedia, and that's how I got addicted to a lot of historical stuff. And Spartacus, me personally, Spartacus is one of my personal historical heroes because he's like an underdog fighting against slavery. And after seeing this entire show, all the seasons, for me as a black man, I often ask the question, like, which slavery was worse, under the Roman Empire or here in America, or were they equally as bad? Because the only difference is under the Roman Empire, everyone of every ethnicity except for American Indians were getting screwed by the Romans, both spiritually, mentally, and physically, if you catch my meaning. So it's not.
I can tell that's going to raise an interesting discussion later. Anyway, if we can get off the history of communism in Spartacus and get back on track. Spartacus, Blood and Sand. As I was saying, the depictions for me that are realistic are the way the slaves are treated, the portrayal of the violence. I also really like the internal politics. In fact, the internal politics for me is what sells the show. So, and it's that I want to talk about next. In terms of, it strikes me if you parallel the Roman culture of this time to, and it's a bit of a stretch, but bear with me, and I want to get History Bro's opinion on this. I see some interesting parallels with the Indian class system that still exists today, and I'll give an example. So, Bollywood, for example, is predominantly.
Apologies, Lance. Do you mean the caste system?
That's what I said. The caste system.
I thought you said the class system.
No. I did say caste. It probably sounded like class. I meant the caste system. So, So Bollywood, for example, is deemed and perceived to be, and according to discussions I've had with actors that work in it, largely dominated and run by, I think it's about half a dozen or so key families. And these are very, very powerful families in India, and they have a tradition of sons and daughters growing up and working in the Bollywood film industry, which is a superb job to have. And it's only really people of a certain caste that get to have those jobs, as in the starring roles in the all singing, all dancing musicals. In the Roman Empire of this time, again, I'm not an expert.
It's the Republic. Sorry, it's not the Empire.
The Republic. Thank you for correcting me, and please do. My perception is that it seems to be that there are several powerful families at the upper echelons who have a lot of control and a lot of influence. Now, is that true? What we know, according to what there is in the history books, History Broken, and can you enlighten us a bit further?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. It's interesting you should mention the Indian caste system. Of course, they have the idea of the untouchables in India, even today.
Yeah.
Even today. That's why I always find it a bit galling when Indian people come to England and moan about the class system. It's like, it's a million times worse in India. Thank you very much. But in ancient Roman, in the late Republic period, yeah, it's absolutely the case. It's one of the most heavily, what could you say, stratified societies that we know of. Almost ridiculously so as well. So you've got freeborn Roman citizens, okay? And then if you want to go upwards from there, let's say, it really, really depended how prestigious your family were. So if you're patrician, there's many, many layers. I could honestly deliver a lecture an hour long on this. So
well, 5 minutes. I'll give you 5 minutes on the sand timer.
Quick 5 minutes. Okay. So one of the biggest distinctions is between patrician and plebeian. If you're patrician, roughly speaking, it would be like being aristocratic. You simply won't be considered a patrician family unless your family go back to almost the dawn of Rome, which is like the 7th century BC. There are very few patrician families, relatively few. I mean, remember Rome, even in the 1st century BC, which is what we're talking about here, wasn't very big. It was big for the ancient world. You're looking at 500,000, 750,000 people, which is one of the biggest cities in the world. You probably have to go to China to find a bigger city. But 250,000 people in our world isn't a very big city, is it? That's not particularly massive. And so you can have 12 families more or less control commerce and politics. Absolutely. So there's like the Piso family, there's the Brutii, the Julii, the Claudii. These are the most famous families. And yeah, they run it all. They've got it sewn up. And it beyond being a patrician, it would be how many of your ancestors have held high office. The high offices in Rome are, of course, the consuls, the praetors, the aediles, the censors, the tribunates. You know, if in your family, you can date your family back to the 6th century BC, and you've had 5 consuls and 8 praetors and 2 aediles in your family, your ancestors. Okay. And there's another family that are all similar to you, but they've had like 3 less praetors in their family. Well, then you're very definitely above them. It was Tom Holland, the historian and novelist writer, Tom Holland, who did Rubicon, for example, but he's written lots of other books about ancient Rome, talks about this in some depth, saying that the families at this point, the 1st century BC, were obsessed with who held precedent over the others. Obsessed by it. So yeah, it really, really mattered. And if we're going to go down from just your freeborn Roman citizen, if you want to work downwards from there, or there's another whole level of equites, which is like the business class. But if we want to work down from maybe this is talking to something that Leroy was talking about, the nature of slavery in the late Republic. Yeah, there's many, many layers of it. In America, in the South, in the 19th century, for example, you were simply a slave or you weren't a slave. Well, that's not what it was like in ancient Rome. There are many, many degrees of indentured slavery. So, for example, at the absolute bottom of the barrel, you might have someone that works in the tin mines of Numidia, right? That is the worst. That is the absolute worst. You're chattel. You are treated lower than an animal. If you die, nobody cares. You're just left. Okay. And then at the upper echelon, you could be a slave of a consul, and you've got massive amounts of fortune in your own right. You've got lots and lots of power in your own right. You may even own slaves of your own. Imagine that, slave owning slaves, right? And you could be freed. Yeah, and you could be freed. You can get emancipated, and it happened loads. It was sort of expected that after a while, as long as you were good and did your job well, your master would emancipate you, and then you become a freedman. And there's a whole class of people, like hundreds of thousands of people that were freedmen. So you're not a full Roman citizen, but you're not a slave anymore. You are free, but you've always got that stamp of having been a slave. And nonetheless, freedmen could be extremely rich and powerful. So it's very, very different, a very, very different system to sort of 19th century America.
That's
and there's many more layers to it.
That's a really good breakdown, actually.
Thank you, history, bro.
Yeah, and the freedman class, I guess they'd almost be like the lower middle class of Roman citizens in a way.
Sometimes they could be the most powerful men in the Roman world. The Emperor Claudius, about the 40s AD, his freedmen, 2 or 3 of his top freedmen, essentially ran the empire.
Right.
They were some of the richest, most powerful men in the world, in the Roman world.
I think really at this point, it might be interesting just to point out something that would maybe give an awful lot of other people that are watching a kind of a simpler spin on that, and that is that the creators of The Sopranos had based that show on precisely that, on exactly what History Bro was saying.
That's interesting. The Sopranos.
Yes.
Oh, I love Sopranos. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So the 5 families in The Sopranos would be like the top family echelons that we're talking about.
Yeah, I think one of the characters is also called Livia, I think.
Yeah, you might be right there. And then, of course, you've got the capos. That I mean, that's an ancient Italian phraseology, isn't it? Isn't that right, History Bro?
Capo means captain, doesn't it? Basically, captain.
Yeah.
Capo di capituti, a captain of captains, a boss, essentially.
History Bro, where would you put the gladiators in the class system of the Roman Empire?
Well, very, very interesting, very good question. And again, could talk for 40 minutes on that, but the 2-minute version.
Yeah, your sand is almost up.
is that it's a funny place to be, like a chariot racer in the Hippodrome or the Circus Maximus. You are both the lowest of the low. You are something like a prostitute. you were something like a beggar or worse, and yet also people loved you. Also, if you were good at it anyway. Also, you were extremely famous, like an actor, and people loved you and wanted to be you. Women wanted to be with you, and men wanted to be you. And yet also you were the lowest of the low at the same time. And any respectable person would blush to even be near you with embarrassment for you. So it's a really weird thing. There's not really a modern equivalent of that. So it's an odd thing. It's interesting.
That is very interesting, and you get to see how the different gladiators or potential gladiators in this show are constantly within their own little world, jostling for position. The internal politics and the layers of authority is something about the show that I really like. It's one of the things I think it gets right. You know, there's constant reference to the guy who's going to come and open the games in Capua. He's got a specific title. I forget his name right at this moment, but every time he's mentioned with reverence. And Batiatus is constantly, you know, the whole party at the villa, which Lucretia organizes, is for the benefit of impressing that guy. And then they hear that he's actually not going to turn up.
That's the magistrate.
The magistrate, thank you. And then what happens, of course, is that because, you know, Lucretia basically has all the slaves and all the gladiators on offer to do whatever. And Lithia, who is, for want of a better word, the town gossip, as soon as various things take place, she spreads word. And then you have all kinds of important people turning up to the house of Batiatus, not to see the gladiators, but to see their basest desires you know, seen to, which again of itself, you know, sex is power. That's an adage as old as time. Sex is power. I don't see how that would have been any different in this era. In fact, if anything, it would have been more poignant.
No, especially one of the things that we do whenever we look at the Roman Empire and the pre-Empire, the Republic, is we look at things that are comparable to what we know today. So we try and find those parallels to see whether we can match them up. But there's an awful lot that just doesn't match up to to the kind of sensibilities that we have today. I mean, a lot of what they were and did is impossible and implausible, really, for us to, you know, we can't comprehend what it was genuinely like. But we are, and I think filmmakers and storytellers do their best to try and make these things as approachable as possible. So obviously they have to a degree, play fast and loose with history. It's inevitable because we have to be told stories, or, you know, we have to be told stories that are simplified. Okay, and that's not to say that the audiences are simpletons, but that's just to say that we require stories that are comparable, and sequences and scenarios that are comparable to our own. And as I say, it's, you know, we can't fully comprehend. I mean, if you do, as History Bro has said, read Plutarch or Tacitus or Suetonius, or Cassius Dio or Martial or Juvenal, it's, you know, it's very, very difficult for us. You know, we can understand what they're saying, we know what they're saying, we can draw in the facts, but we can't draw modern parallels with an awful lot. There's most of what went on in ancient Rome or in ancient antiquity, full stop, that is incomparable with modern society.
I said this last time, and I think I should say it again, is that there's an old adage, isn't there, that the past is a foreign land and things are done differently there. It's very, very difficult to get your mind into the morality or values or social milieu of even sort of the 17th or 18th century. So the first century BC, best part of 2 millennia ago, is very, very difficult. I was told at undergrad, you don't try, because you won't be able to do it unless you were born and raised in that world. You will never be able to fully understand it. Not fully, not properly. But Lance, before we move on, I thought what we could do if that's
Please.
all right, is over the weeks I could eke out the bit in Plutarch about it, and the bits that are in Appian and Cassius Dio, and the odd bits and bobs from Cicero about it. So I thought maybe I could read just the first paragraph from Plutarch.
No, yeah, I was going to suggest something similar actually. So that'd be great. And if we touch upon anything else that's relevant, feel free to jump back to it. But a segment of it each week would be wonderful.
Cool. So just the first paragraph. It's probably just a couple of hundred words. So it's
right.
about
Blue. Let's hold on one photo.
So, but before I read it, just to say again that if anyone doesn't appreciate this, but this is absolutely remarkable that this has survived 2,000 years.
Yeah,
it's the writing of someone from 2,000 years ago, obviously in English translation. But almost every word here, I hope I'm not overstating it. I hope this isn't just a ancient history nerd thing to say, but almost every word is like gold. It's gold dust. It's someone speaking to you from an incomprehensibly long time ago. And everything he says is, that's anyone that makes any TV show about Spartacus or writes a book, a novel about Spartacus, they've just read this. They've only got the same thing to go on as we have. So here we go. I'll read it. Plutarch says in his Life of Cassius, quote, "The rising of the gladiators and their devastation of Italy, which is generally known as the War of Spartacus, began as follows. A man called Lentulus Batiatus had an establishment for gladiators at Capua." Again, he doesn't tell you any more than that. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. Most of them were Gauls and Thracians. They had done nothing wrong, but simply because of the cruelty of their owner, were kept in close confinement until the time came for them to engage in combat. 200 of them planned to escape, but their plan was betrayed, and only 78, who realized this, managed to act in time and get away, armed with choppers and spits, which they seized from some cookhouse. On the road, they came across some wagons, which were carrying arms for gladiators to another city, and they took these arms for their own. Then they occupied a strong position and elected 3 leaders. The first of these was Spartacus. He doesn't even tell us who the other 2 were. He, Spartacus, was a Thracian from the nomadic tribes, and not only had a great spirit, but great physical strength. But he was more than would have been expected of his condition, i.e., a nomadic Thracian. What Plutarch's saying there, a nomadic Thracian should be a barbarian, an unlettered, illiterate idiot. But he says it's not. It's more than you would expect from his condition. He was most intelligent and cultured, being more like a Greek, an actual full-blown Greek, than a Thracian. They say that when he was first taken to Rome to be sold, a snake was seen coiled around his head while he was asleep, and his wife, who came from the same tribe and was a prophetess subject to possession by the frenzy of Dionysus, can talk about that in a minute if you want, declared that this sign meant that he would have a great and terrible power which would end in misfortune. This woman shared his escape and was then living with him. And I'll save any more till next week. But so there you go. You get an idea. Everything he's mentioned, it doesn't go back and explain any more about his wife. It doesn't go back and explain any more about Batiatus or the other leaders. That's all you get. So any fiction that's made up about this afterwards is exactly that. It's the fancy of a screenwriter or a novelist.
History, bro. You know what? Yeah. You just reminded me of when you read that, the Nat Turner insurrection here in America of 1831.
Right.
That was supposedly Nat Turner received a sign from God, and I'm being very careful, Lance, because I promise I won't talk about religion on here, but
politics.
Or politics. Thank you. But Nat Turner supposedly received a sign from God to lead his people in revolt against their, no offense to anyone on here, white oppressors. And he almost succeeded, but
it was a very small scale, though, wasn't it? It was on a tinier scale.
Yeah, it was on a tiny, compared to Spartacus, it was on a very tiny scale. But what you just read reminded me of that. And, you know, like I said, as a historian myself, I owe guys like Spartacus, William Wallace, and Nat Turner, John Brown, Harriet Tubman, those people from history, I like because they're like the heroes. They fight for the underdog. They fight against the evil of oppression. And that's what I loved about this show. Not to get off topic, but that's what I loved about this show. Even though I'd have to say I agree with most of everyone on here. The first season was mostly Hollywood than his history, but I have to say, even then, it's more historically accurate than the Kirk Douglas version. But even the Kirk Douglas version, had I not even watched that movie or had that movie never been made, I never would have heard of Spartacus ever.
I think that's when most of us first heard of Spartacus is because of the, you know.
But of course, that was very much restricted by the Hays Code at the time. So, you know, obviously there were certain things that could and could not make it into that movie, whether it was written down on the page or not. So, you know, the Hays Code was really being the movie governing body at that moment in time. So there were very much restrictions on that. But funny thing about just quickly going back to what Leroy was saying actually about the original Spartacus movie. I mean, when that was released in the United States, nowhere else but just the United States, it was considered to be a very un-American movie. It was considered to be a very pro-communist movie, and it was also considered to be a very pro, let's just say, black activist movie, right?
And because it's the civil rights movement.
Yeah, and it just it was really badly received. I mean, there was obviously certain members of the press were trying to suppress the release of it. There were protests outside of cinemas, and it wasn't until JFK actually went to a cinema to see it. He could have watched it, you know, elsewhere, but he went to a public cinema and sat with the rest of the audience, and he watched that movie, and that was what gained that movie its success.
It should also be known that that movie also inspired Mel Gibson to make Braveheart.
And Braveheart's just as historically accurate as the Kirk Douglas version of. He went for the same level of accuracy as the Kirk Douglas version.
But like I said, had it not been for these movies, I would never been motivated to look them up in the encyclopedia. Because, like I said,
their job is to entertain. I would say first and foremost, and their second job is to perhaps, as a byproduct of entertaining you, provoke an interest in the period where you de facto go and do more research, maybe buy a book or two, and certainly, actually, from what I can recall, Spartacus and I think also Ben-Hur were the two films as a kid that got me interested in the Roman Republic / Empire, depending on which period we're talking about.
A super quick word on Braveheart. It's one of the most laughably inaccurate things ever committed to the silver screen. William Wallace was nothing more than a criminal who deserved his conviction in my opinion.
Oh, political statement.
History, bro. Now you started it.
Let's leave that for the Braveheart stream, please.
Hero. I do agree with you. Braveheart was historically inaccurate, but William Wallace was not
a traitor and a
Anyway, let's pause that. Let's table that for another time. Hold it there.
History, bro. You just.
But it is a very inaccurate film.
It is. I don't dispute that. But
anyway, right. Let's
be talking like that in Scotland. Don't be talking like that.
We have to focus on Andy Whitfield's butt now. So as we can see in this provocative shot, let's move on.
Oh yeah.
Right. Okay. So we're gonna get into the minutiae of the episodes and what's been happening. With the various
how come you haven't said anything?
Because my history is like I can't remember what I had for dinner last night. Like,
but he's going to focus on the content of the episode, which is what we're doing now.
I swear to be burned, chained, beaten.
All right, there's a lot of characters in these two episodes. We get to spend more time with a couple of people we find out about. Certainly a lot more in the case of some characters. Let's go through the people at the Ludus, and let's talk about the upper echelons first. The high class citizens, if we like. So we have the pairing of John Hannah and Lucy Lawless as Batiatus and his wife Lucretia. And incidentally, in the history bro, I found a couple of different sources that offered different names for Batiatus's full name for various reasons, which is quite interesting reading. Some say he was named such and such, and others think he might have been named so and so, but we won't get into that now. Okay. But it's curious to see that we're not even 100% sure what his full name is, as much as we can. But yeah, so and she's always scheming, but I think shush, Leroy, for a moment. I think that she's always scheming, but she has not only her own interests, but there is a love between these two, which is key to the story. In the same context in Game of Thrones, that two of the most despicable characters had the strongest love out of all of the characters. They were the two that loved each other the most, the purest, if you like. That's also true of these people, as much as they're awful, self-entitled, horrible individuals that we might, our own moral compass would look down on them and appall their behavior. These two characters do love each other deeply, and he is constantly reminded of the fact that he has a good wife who's got his back, which is quite a rare thing, especially in today's society, let alone Rome. So that, and I think these two characters play that, and there's a lot to play with that relationship. I think they perform it really, really, really well. Blue, you want to say something about that?
Well, yeah, I agree 100%. They definitely have, nowadays we would call this an open marriage, obviously, but from both of them. But there definitely is a love and a loyalty there. I think more so in episode 4, you do see it where she helps him a lot. She helps him out a lot more than he anticipates, and even it could be a male pride issue. But I feel the same way sometimes as a dad, and if I was a husband, that he wants to provide for his family and his house, and he feels guilty asking for his wife's help. But she's like, well, the thing is, we're a team, we're a pair, we're a marriage. When you suffer, I suffer. We're in this together. And yeah, she's loyal to him. I mean, she's not always sexually loyal to him, but that's I guess he's not stupid neither. I think he kind of knows, but he's just kind of ignoring it.
Can I say something about these two? Not the characters, but also the actors, John Hannah and Lucy Lawless. When I first saw Spartacus, the first thing that came to my mind, I've created a technique about it. I named it after Robin Williams and Denzel Washington. I call it the Robin Williams Denzel Washington technique. Why do you think Robin Williams and Denzel Washington won Oscars for Good Will Hunting and Training Day? Because Robin Williams is known for doing comedic roles, playing buffoons. Denzel Washington is known for playing good guys. Their roles as in Good Will Hunting and Training Day is something that no one has ever seen him before. This is the same way. John Hannah, before this, I've only seen him in the Mummy movies. He was a buffoon. He played a buffoon in the Mummy and the Mummy Returns. Lucy Lawless, Xena Warrior Princess. When I saw them play these roles as Batiatus and Lucretia in this first season alone, I'm like, I forgot that they even did those.
Yeah, these actors, I will say that if you were sitting down and you were casting this show and you were like, okay, who do I want to play the manipulative, sinful Batiatus, and then his scheming yet charismatic wife? These are not the first two actors that would be on that list. But I can't picture anyone else playing these roles now.
Exactly.
Inside Man, you got thoughts on these characters, these particular?
I mean, it's funny. Excuse me. It's funny because I mean, as it's gone on, I've just found John Hannah nothing less than irritating, to be honest with you.
Really?
Yeah.
Do you not enjoy his performance?
No, not at all. I think
finding him irritating.
He does this thing where he starts to talk like this, and then he kind of drops off. And he's always talking like this, and then he drops off again.
Come on, Inside Man, tell us how
He's
you
not
really
wrong.
And I just think, oh my God. And he does this
Okay,
awful talking with a tone.
What about Lucy Lawless?
I think she's okay. Yeah, I think she's all right. But yeah, I can't get on with him. He just every time he's on the screen, he drives me absolutely fucking nuts.
So, Inside Man, you disagree with me on comparing them to Robin Williams and Denzel Washington, then?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, a different class of actor altogether, a completely different class of actor altogether. However, I know what you're talking about going against type, acting against type. But it's just, he just irritates the hell out of me. It's really irritating me, almost as much as Alithia. So. Very nearly there.
We won't mention her much more today. Let's cover the others. You've got Salonius, who I talked about last week. I mentioned he was my favorite character. We get a bit more with him. There's some really nice stuff between him and Lucretia. And then we have the servants of the house. We have the character of Navia. We get to know her for the first time. Crixus has a thing for her, and she's almost like a plaything to Lucretia, and Lucretia gets her to try on things like the bracelets, and then has her disrobe so she can see what they look like with boobs. It's all very humiliating for the slaves, but feels real to me. It feels I do feel like this is how they would have been treated, probably worse, if I'm honest. But
the reason why there was a Spartacus, why Spartacus did what he did.
So but I do think it's one of I like the fact that the show doesn't shy away from nudity, to be honest. When I first heard about it, and a lot of people described the show as almost like soft porn. I don't agree with that analogy. But nevertheless, it's something that won't be for everybody on that basis. What about let's talk about the other gladiators. We get to know more about them. We find out that Barker is, well, for all intents and purposes, his character's gay. And sort of has his own concubine in the form of the boy who's in charge of the weapons and so forth. We find out a bit more about Asher. This actor was imported from Hungary, by the way.
Wow.
They specifically cast an actor from that neck of the world because they wanted the gladiators to look like they came from different parts of the Roman Republic.
That's smart.
So so he was cast from Eastern Europe quite deliberately. Does anybody, Spartacus aside, what about Navarro? That's one of the first acting roles of that individual, by the way, who would go on to play. Yeah, Varro, who would go on to play Bruce Willis's son in Die Hard 5 or 6.
Varro and Doctore are probably, as far as the gladiators are concerned, are probably my favorite characters in this season because they're more honorable. Doctore more than Varro, because Varro has flaws and stuff like. Well, if you know his backstory, why he sold himself to become a gladiator, but he loves his family and he's doing it to absolve and also try to get his family out of the mess he made. But he's also loyal to Spartacus. Doctore, not realizing how dishonorable Batiatus and Lucretia, the house of Batiatus is, he is extremely loyal, and he feels that the house of Batiatus is a house of honor because of where they brought him.
Hold on that still, please, Chris. Thank you.
Pardon me. Because where they brought him out of to make him the man he is today, especially, and in the prequel you'll see that. So Doctore is probably, I put Doctore, then Varro, then Spartacus himself.
Okay.
Are probably my 3 favorite characters among the gladiators.
Inside Man, dare I ask, do you like any of the gladiator characters?
I still like Crixus, and the reason I like Crixus is because there's a sort of a kind of a complexity there. There's a conflict there. I don't know.
Yeah.
There's a weirdness about him that I shouldn't really like him. But yeah, but I always like those kind of characters that have got a little bit of weirdness, a quirkiness, and something a little bit sort of bubbling under that's not quite come to the surface quite yet.
I thought whatever he had bubbling under came to the surface fairly quickly in the first time we saw him. He does have a really good narrative arc, not just in this season, but right the way. I think he's the only actor who's in every episode.
Yeah, he is. Yeah,
He has a really, really good arc. All the way through, really well played by
Manu
Bennett. I think that the standard of acting in the show, some people aside, but my personal view is everybody plays their roles as a minimum adequately, in many cases perfectly, but standard of the acting overall, I think, is quite high. History Bro, keen to hear your thoughts. Now you're a bit further in on acting and maybe a favorite character or two, if you have any.
Here it comes.
I don't really like this show. The blonde dude, the curly-haired blonde dude.
Yeah,
I thought he's that's who it is. Yeah. I haven't even committed his name to it. I thought his acting was atrocious.
What?
That's his first. That's his first acting role, I think.
Yeah, I wasn't buying it. I wasn't believing it at all. No, I think last time I described this show as dumb, shallow, and I don't know what. Super gay. That was it. Dumb, shallow, and super gay. The only thing I would change on that is to change it to hyper gay.
I know when we discussed it last time, I was thinking, I can't wait to see what he says.
Actually, having said all that, I don't hate this show. Right? Yeah. It's okay. It's a bit of frivolity. It's a bit of entertainment. I don't hate it. I'll happily.
Were you not entertained?
I was mildly, very, very mildly entertained. But it's like a soap opera that happens to be set in ancient Rome. It's
that's fair.
It's not. It's lightweight. It's not really for me. Do you ever see the show Plebs?
Yeah.
The comedy Plebs.
Yeah. Yeah.
See, that is like an out and out comedy, right? I quite like Plebs. I really quite like Plebs. Whereas this is sort of trying to be 300, trying to be edgy. Like, how many times do I need to see a slow motion guy going, "Ooh," like I'm laughing at that now.
Well,
I'm laughing at that. How many roided up meatheads do I need to see all oiled up?
You're going to need to see that slow motion shot at least another 75 times before the show's over.
It's all right. It's all right. I'm pretty scathing about it, but it is what it is. It is what
what's really funny with poor Crixus is that Lucy Lawless is obviously a very attractive woman, but you would think that in those days he's probably she wouldn't look like that, and it's weird because we're looking at this guy's. He's sleeping with her, but he's in love with this other slave girl. It's like, oh God, poor you. You're with Lucy Lawless. But in all reality, he's probably her situation would be she'd probably be horrible to look at. He probably would be like forced to either sleep with her or be killed. And it's like that. I know it doesn't come off like that on screen, but like that's the premise I got where he's doing this with her, but he doesn't want to. And
exactly. I said.
I think if they cast a less attractive actress as Lucretia, though, I don't think all the other plot lines with her would really sell.
Oh yeah, but that's why I find it funny because it's like Manu Bennett, plus he's good looking too. But yeah, two attractive people. Oh, poor you! You have to like sleep with Xena. But but the whole drama. That's the whole drama. It's like you're forced to do this. You don't care about her, you don't love her, but like you kind of have no choice in that matter.
To piggyback on what you are saying though, this stuff like this actually happened in real life, not just among slave girls being forced or being raped by their slave masters, but slave men too. I mean, this happened in America. This happened in Rome throughout history. I mean, Crixus really had no choice. So basically, it's still rape is still rape, no matter who the victim.
Yeah, you could. One of the things you're quite right to point that out. One of the things I quite like about it is you can see that Crixus, when he has to sleep with her, is incredibly uncomfortable about having to do it. It's not like he's going, "Okay, great, I get to have some sex," and they play that very well. He's very sort of unemotionally engaged about the whole thing, and feels embarrassed about it later.
I mean, the massive difference really with this with this period in antiquity is that because they are your personal property, they are there for you to do whatever you want.
Yeah,
and that's what's messed up.
Yeah,
that is what's messed up.
Yeah,
I think there's a very good bit. I don't know if anyone's familiar with I Claudius.
Yes.
Robert Graves. I Claudius.
Yeah,
of course,
great.
there's the TV.
Great show.
There's the TV thing with Derek Jacobi, but the original books, I Claudius and Claudius the God. There's 2 books it's based on. There's some very interesting passages in that where it talks about when you buy a slave, you're buying them for work and for sex. That's what it is.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so that's the nature of it. And with both sexes, there's an interesting bit where I think it's Julia, Augustus's daughter. Her and one of her cousins talking about, do you buy your own slaves? And she says, I used to select the men ones when I was younger, but I always picked the most handsome ones, and they weren't any good at work. So I don't really bother anymore. I let somebody else pick my slaves for me these days. But that's just an interesting an interesting insight into what it was. Yeah, because they are your property. They're human chattel.
Yeah. And I can imagine that kind of those kind of conversations, that kind of flippancy over a human being, that those kind of almost innocuous kind of chats over the people that you are going to own and do own, and what you're going to do with them, almost certainly did happen.
Yeah, there's one more thing I'll just mention while we're talking about it: the nature of slavery in the ancient world, or in specifically the ancient Roman world, specifically the late Republic. There's such a thing called the Saturnalia. It's very, very broadly like Christmas. I mean, it takes place around the same time as Christmas. Okay. And one of the traditions during the Saturnalia, which you would not have had this in other forms of slavery, such as in the United States in the 18th and 19th century. On Saturnalia, which was a festival which lasted many days, sometimes as many as 5, 6, 7 days, usually more like 3 days, the master and the slave swap positions.
That's right. Yeah.
The slave gets to act as the master for a couple of days. Yeah. And it's all a bit tongue-in-cheek. Like, you can't actually then go and whip or rape your master. you haven't really switched positions.
Although that might be part of his plan. I mean, who knows?
Well, right, yeah. But you get to play the role of switching positions. So
you're right. That wouldn't happen in America during slavery. Right.
So that gives you an impression that Roman form of slavery was less stringent, shall we say, less strict, less formalized, less bloodthirsty, less intense, I think might be the word. But having said all of that, the thing that is revealed from accounts about Saturnalia is that some masters, some slave holders, some owners just refuse to do that. There's no way they're going to allow that to happen in their household. Other masters really lent into it and loved it and kept it going for days after, and were really, really generous to their slaves when they got to be the master during Saturnalia. So, a bit like Christmas, different households lean into it to different extents. There's one household on your street, which is the house is covered in lights, and they've got a giant tree, and it's the best part of the year. Other households barely recognize it.
Yeah.
So again, it's interesting. There's many layers. The real reality is there are many, many layers to it.
Very, very interesting perspective. Talking of interesting perspectives, this is the actress Katrina Law, who plays the role of Navia in season 1.
She doesn't play Navia. She plays someone else. She plays Spartacus' new love interest.
She
plays. I forgot her name.
Oh, have I got her mixed up?
You got it all mixed up, man. Katrina Law.
Isn't this the girl who is interested in Crixus?
No, that's the girl. This is the girl who's interested in Spartacus. She shows up. She shows up a couple episodes. I think either episode 7 or episode 8 of season 1. I forgot her name.
Hang on. Well, Cynthia Addie Robinson plays Navia, but I think later.
Yeah,
she's not
why
Navia in season 1, is she?
No, or in the prequel. I don't know why they switched.
Yeah, you're right. Sorry, Katrina Law plays Mira. We won't talk about her today because she hasn't turned up yet. The actress who plays Navia, I'm keen to get Leslie Ann Brand. That was it. Sorry, they do look a bit. They've got a bit of a similar look. I mean, by that I mean they're both gorgeous, basically. But yeah, she plays Navia in season 1.
And in the prequel,
and at first I did kind of think, is this girl just window dressing or can she act? But when I've watched the show probably about 6 times now, all the way through, and I have to say, on the whole, I think she's pretty good. But I'm keen to hear the thoughts of my panel on this. So, Inside Man, got a view? Please share. Okay, we'll move on.
Yeah.
So, what do you think?
Yeah, please do.
No, so she was a recognizer from the show Lucifer on Netflix, and she plays Maze, and she's like Lucifer's right-hand demon. And
that's right.
Yeah, very beautiful.
She's pretty good in that, actually.
She's very good, and I actually think she has some great character development in the final 2 seasons. And yeah, right now we're only up 4 episodes in. Not much to do yet, but I want to see how her character progresses.
No, she gets to do quite a lot in season 1. The contract negotiations with her and her agent and the show, I think, broke down, and that's why she didn't come back. But I mean, she's never stopped working, so I don't think it hurt her career that much.
Yeah.
And maybe it was good that there were some cast changes.
And good on her, Lance. I mean, she looks it's been like 12 years since the show, and she looks exactly the same. Like it's like she aged 5 minutes. It's amazing how that happens.
Yeah, for anyone who watches The Walking Dead, she was also a major character in The Ones Who Live.
She was messing with Rick and Michonne.
Yeah, and there she is in Spartacus. So yeah, so but yeah, I think she's pretty good.
I like her better than the one they replaced her with.
There you go, Inside Man. This all-male panel overall thinks her acting talents are good, and we are not influenced by anything else at all, and are completely impartial. So, any professional opinion expressed here. Yeah. So, okay. Well, Inside Man, coming back to you, because I'm just not going to leave you alone until you say something positive.
The thing is, right? Okay.
Well, I've got a question for you first.
Yeah.
Before the thing is there any actor or character in the show you do like?
Yes, Crixus. That's it.
Just
so far, it's just that I just found. I mean, watching this. Bearing in mind, this is only the second time I've watched it.
Right.
And the first time I watched it was pretty much on its release. So, and watching it again, I realized that it takes a very, very long time. It's very convoluted. It takes a very, very long time to get from basically to get to the point. It's just so convoluted and so drawn out. I just feel that it really suffers from that kind of stretching that not necessarily padded, but and I don't know why. See, I liked it an awful lot when I first saw it, and now I'm looking back on it. All I'm thinking of is what was it that made me like this so much at that time? I can't put my finger on it. However, there is something that I really don't like about it. Something that I really, really am not liking about it at all, and that is this kind of pseudo Shakespearean type dialogue that just sounds quite odd and a little bit clunky, and
that's funny because that's
it's
one of the
just,
things about the show I like the most. Actually,
I mean, it isn't. Put it this way: it's not Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, and it certainly isn't I Claudius, Robert Graves' I Claudius. It's yeah, um, yeah. I don't know. It's just too. It just feels like it's too much. It's too much trying to be slightly Shakespearean.
But is there anything wrong with that? I don't think there's anything wrong with trying to be slightly Shakespearean and giving us a sort of, okay, let's lean into the language being historically different, but do it in a way that a general viewing audience can still understand it, but still give some nod to the ancient tongue.
This is where we kind of we've been tainted, I suppose, by things like I Claudius, and we've been tainted by Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, and little bits of dialogue that have been put into Ben-Hur, and little bits of dialogue that come from Gladiator and from Spartacus and what have you. However, they didn't speak like that. They really didn't speak like that. If you look at some of the writings on, say, for example, on any of the writings, they genuinely didn't speak like a Shakespearean play.
Well, I mean, I know that, but
this is, we've almost been trained to believe that they spoke like this, and a more accurate depiction really is HBO's Rome. In terms of how they speak. I mean, I know that
show.
I know that you know that they didn't speak like this. I know that we all know they didn't speak like that. Didn't speak like this at all. But I can't get my head around.
Please, blue collar, please hold on that still. Sorry,
I just can't get my head around why they persist in making this, Shakespearean, try to make it Shakespearean. Is it to give it some kind of gravitas, that kind of Shakespearean type language? It doesn't add anything for me. It really doesn't add anything to me.
Well, it works for me, but hey, we don't always agree, and that's fine. I prefer having a panel that doesn't agree. When we're all singing from the same song sheet, gets very boring. Well, let's move on to this subject.
Others are said to be ravenous beasts.
Make him do it again.
Yeah, I mean, we get a pretty full-on taste of the upper echelons of Roman delights at the house of Batiatus.
Easy, blue collar, down, boy.
And there's more to come. So this is mainly, well, I mean, if anything, we could say that episode 3 is more about the sex and episode 4 is more about the violence. Let's deal with the depiction of the. It's kind of a sort of borderline orgy scene. It's more of a celebration where there's a bit of everything's going, and the slaves are paraded around like household objects for guests to come and try at their whim, with Lucretia keeping a beady eye on people as to how far they take things. And I think it's in a later episode that Lucretia actually makes sure that Navia isn't given up on offer to certain individuals. So, I mean, she does have a heart, albeit a horrendous one. Blue collar, your thoughts on the depiction of this scene as a whole? And
when I first saw it and now watching it again, I was curious what Bro would say about this in terms of historical accuracy. But yeah, it's like they are treating these human beings like they are cattle. And it's funny how even nowadays how we look at sex and intimacy with two people. But imagine at one point they make a joke about the guy's like, I give you I bet like 5 coins that the guy can't last like another 10 seconds or something. And they're watching these guys, and the one guy, as he's performing, will say he looks very uncomfortable, as most of us would, and it's like he's not enjoying this at all. And watching these people like just all like parade you around and are selling you off as like not just a gladiator, but plus a slave, plus a sex slave, like just it's an uncomfortable scene to watch, thinking like, damn, like that's how demeaning and how little they think of these people, like they're less than human. Or like it's like almost like watching two animals have sex, and like you're betting on which is like the bigger stag or the bigger horse or something. And I'm like, it's powerful, but also uncomfortable at the same time. And I'm like, it's a scene. I'm like, yeah, I'm curious Yeah, like how would that really happen back then? I don't know.
Well, I mean, that's an interesting question, isn't it? To what degree did these things happen? Reading through Plutarch, I haven't got to the orgy parts yet.
Yeah, there isn't any.
No,
Yeah.
so history, bro.
Yeah,
What are the sources for the Roman levels
Okay.
of fornication that do exist in
Right.
historical terms?
Yeah. Okay. So the thing is, there's this idea of the Roman orgy. Okay, and there certainly are accounts of that, but it's in a later period. This is again, we're talking 70, the early 70s or late 70s. It's BC. We counted down, however you want to say it. We're talking the 72 BC. Romans didn't really have orgies particularly at that point. So, okay, put it like this: during the age of Julius Caesar, or just before the age of Julius Caesar, which is what this is, Romans were so straight-laced that women didn't dance. A Roman woman would not be seen dancing. That was over the top, right? During the age of Caesar and Pompey, then you start having what we would think of as, like the 1920s flappers.
Yeah.
Where women were a bit more liberated and they would just drink and dance and stuff, right? A counterculture, okay? Then during the age of it gets worse as you go along, or better, if you want to look at it. By the late Augustan period, or by the age of Tiberius, say, you've got what we would think of as relatively loose women, or just what normal women to your eye, like 1960s hippies type. They're liberated, right? Then by the time you get to Caligula or Nero, then you've got like the full orgies, right? Where it's crazy, where it's just some sort of crazy sex party. Okay. In 70 BC, it may have happened. It may well have happened, but it wasn't common. It wasn't well known. It wasn't written about. It wasn't. Do you know what I mean? If you think of how we live today and the Victorians, how much more straight-laced the Victorians were than us, right? Yeah. Maybe some hippies would have orgies, right? High Victorians wouldn't be having orgies. Actually, they sometimes did, but it's all behind closed doors. Anyway, these guys in 70 BC are like Victorians. They're much more straight-laced than your Nero era orgy type Romans. Yeah. So it could have happened. It may have happened. There's certainly nothing in Plutarch talking about it.
No.
But there you go. Take from it what you will. Make your own mind up.
I think that's a really, really, really interesting point that you made there. Because of the distance away from, in time that we are from the Georgians and the Edwardians and the Victorians. I mean, these, in certain, today we seem to sort of conflate all of the whole of the Roman Empire and the pre-empire, the Republic. We see ancient Rome, or we see all of this kind of period, this 600-year period, if you like, 600-700 year period of empire and republic, and we seem to sort of squash it together. I think for the common or garden person, they seem to think that this is what all Rome was like all of the time. But of course, there are those huge distances between someone like Augustus and Nero, and Pertinax, and and so on and so on and so on. So not everything was identical. All nothing looked the same. Fashions would change, attitudes would change. There would either be, as you say, regressive or progressive, whichever point of view you tend to adopt. But yeah, it's we are as we are the distance between us and the Georgians and the Edwardians and the Victorians, and from the Renaissance and so on and so on. These are the kinds of these are the kind of time frames that we're talking about, but extended even further. And we have to be careful when we're looking at this kind of fiction not to take anything from this as being absolutely, this is what happened. It may have happened in, may have happened, 200 AD, but not, in the first century BC. This may have happened at 400 AD, but not in 100 AD. But we tend to do that because we're almost conditioned by these types of fiction.
Yeah.
Can I say something?
Yeah, jump in, Leroy.
Yes, Inside Man and History Bro. If what you guys are saying is true, and I have no reason to doubt either one of what you guys are saying, then from a historical standpoint, what compelled Spartacus and the gladiators to rise up and revolt? Because something. Well, go back, Blue Collar. I like that scene. That evil witch, man. Something like that alone would make me say enough is enough and rise up by any means necessary. Because you gotta remember, Spartacus and the gladiators were a thorn in the side of the Roman Republic or Empire or whatever you call it for 3 long years.
Yeah, we covered that earlier.
Almost 100,000 people under his command. So, and this has something must have set them off to rise up, just like here in America when we had the Nat Turner slave revolt and the John Brown insurrection. When you treat a human being less than a human being, don't be surprised if they rise up and start killing people.
That's exactly the answer to your own question. It's the fight or die. What's the simple choice of that?
So again, to quote, Plutarch tells us, quote, simply because of the cruelty of their owner.
That's the bit
they were kept in close confinement. Yeah. We haven't got anything more than that. So take from that what you will. That's all you get, really. But one thing to say, just to hammer this point home, that in the 70s BC, how straight laced they were. Someone in the chat who's been very good, Darth Plato, very good. They made a point that so I've recently been doing a series on Load Seaters about Cato the Younger, who is I'm talking in the 40s and 50s and 60s BC, so just slightly after this period, just merely decades after this period. Okay, there was one particular senator who was seen holding hands with his own wife and giving her a peck on the cheek in public, and Cato censored him and said, how dare you be so lewd, right?
Wow.
So you think of the Romans as having these orgies. Well, not at this period. In this period, Rome was extremely conservative with a small c, not the same as conservatism in our age. But they were conservative in the broad sense of that term. They were very, very straight-laced. So, again, something like this may have happened, but it wouldn't have been the norm.
I mean, it's an ongoing plot point that, these kind of delights are to be found in the house of Batiatus, and people start traveling there from Rome because they can't find them anywhere else.
True.
So it becomes this, it's almost like a, secret sex club, for one of
is it just me, or does her face does she look like she need to have her face cut off or have something shoved in her throat?
No,
that's the angle.
No, it's just she just looks evil in this particular shot. I want to ask a more fundamental, basic question, and if we can answer it all briefly before we move on. Do you feel that the depiction of sex in the show is about right, too much, or not enough? Not enough. I'll go to each person in turn, please. History Bro first.
Well, I mean, it's all right. I was warned that it was extremely pornographic. I didn't think it's all that bad. It's nothing worse than loads of other shows. I do think it was a bit unnecessary, but it wasn't that bad. I'm not offended by it or anything like that. It's not that graphic, is it? Really? It's not insanely over the top or anything.
No,
but
it
is a bit. It is a little bit unnecessary. I'd say a tiny bit unnecessary for me, but
a tiny bit salacious, perhaps.
Yeah, but it's fine. It's fine.
Blue Collar.
For the story they're telling, I'm fine with it. I mean, everybody knows you've had PG-13 sex scenes, and you could have two characters kiss and then cut away to the next shot. So, still in the same storyline, like Bro would say, you could cut out some scenes. It's not totally necessary, but for the tone of the show, I don't mind it. I think it's the right amount. It's not over the top, and it's not too little. It's for me, it's okay.
I mean, also the fact that they get to watch one of the gladiators have sex only happens because Lucretia like manipulates it to happen because she likes to throw her power around because they know that she's connected to Glaber, so they do everything they can to please her. Lucretia has recruited her as a friend in her social circle quite deliberately. It's a power play. That's the only reason that they put up with the nonsense from this woman. But she is connected, and the people she is connected to are also connected, which will bring House of Batiatus more power. So, yeah, that's where all that comes from. The actor who plays Varro, incidentally, History Bro, who you were less than impressed with so far, I think he's got much better scenes coming up, to be fair. This was the first thing I think I saw him in, is Jai Courtney. And Jai Courtney, who's in the picture there, would play Kyle Reese in the Terminator Genesis film, which I think is the one Terminator movie that I've actually not watched.
You're not missing anything.
Yeah, don't.
It was the worst Terminator.
No, I've heard it's
the worst Terminator movie ever.
He was also Captain Boomerang in the Suicide Squad.
And he played Bruce Willis's son. I think last
Die Hard, which I've mentioned already. Okay, so Inside Man, sexual content, too much, not enough. About
you know, I think if you took it out, it wouldn't make any difference to the story whatsoever. And in that respect, I think, yeah, probably completely unnecessary.
Okay, well, let's hold on. I'm going to want to test that theory.
I think it was they tried to use it as a major plot device, right? And I don't think it really worked as a plot device. It was really just, for all intents and purposes, it was there to get people talking, to get people watching. Because let's face it, young men, you know, who this was aimed at as an audience, you know, would want to watch this kind of thing. You know, would want to see a little bit of sex, see a little bit of nudity.
Funnily enough, everybody that was recommending it to me was a woman when it was dropping. All the people that were talking to me, oh yeah, Spartacus really good, you know, and it was all these actresses and stuff. And I was prepping for a film at the time, so I just didn't have time to watch TV shows.
That's because it's 80% greased up redheads in loincloths. Yeah, women and gay men are gonna love it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right. So, if this sex scene didn't take place in this episode, the word wouldn't get back to the other people in Rome that these delights are to be found in the house of Batiatus, which would stop the next plot line from happening, because this more powerful senator turns up because he wants to see these things that House of Batiatus has to offer. And as a result of him then turning up and being introduced to Lucretia and Batiatus, Batiatus finds his way back into the games. So it's a fairly significant plot thread without which the story would not work.
You mean that without which that particular thread wouldn't work? Not
well, it's a very significant thread for season one. I would say it's at the core backbone. It's how Batiatus gets back into the games.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always dubious of any show that has to show overt nudity and sex scenes. To be honest with you, because it's, you know, it doesn't necessarily have to be shown to this extent. Look, I'm not
to Inside Man. Have you kidnapped him? Are you a cocoon alien?
See, look, I'm not a prude, not by a long chalk, right? There is no way that I could be considered to be a prude, and you know, there's nothing better than looking at naked women, as far as I'm concerned. You know, it's a wonderful pastime, but I just sometimes think that, you know, when makers of film and TV shows feel that it's a necessity to, you know, keep showing, it does become a little bit dull. That's just my opinion. But
same question on the violence in the show.
Well, to me, yeah, I love a bit of violence. Yeah, don't mind a bit of
So
violence.
is the amount appropriate? Just enough? Too much?
I mean, I think the length of the show, I've got a problem with. I just think it takes, as I said before, it takes too long to get from A to B.
That wasn't the question.
No. So therefore,
no,
I'm going somewhere with this. So therefore, a lot of the violence can be cut down or could have been reduced, and that's not because I'm against violence either. I love a good fight. Who doesn't? Who doesn't like a good fight on screen? That is.
I was going to say, I think we've seen quite a lot of evidence in the last 48 hours that quite a few people are up for a fight in this country.
Yeah.
I saw a good fight last night. So
anyway, we won't talk politics now.
Yeah,
but
I just think they could have shrunk it down a bit, and and I do think that whenever you have to show way too much action, too much violence and too much sex and nudity, then your story is probably lacking in something. There's probably something a little bit too thin going on there, or you are trying to stretch it out.
Leroy, sex and the violence.
The exact opposite of Inside Man.
More sex, more violence.
No, not more. I think it's just right. I think it's just. I think both the sex and the violence, and I more from a historical perspective. I think the sex and the violence is very appropriate at a very appropriate level. What I liked about it, and I really can't say too many negative things about the show because I've seen the entire show over 100 times. Is that I almost lost my thought.
Just on the sex and the violence, I don't want you to talk about the show as a whole.
Yeah, I know.
That's the only thing I'm asking right now.
It's not over the top compared to shows like Game of Thrones, Oz, and Rome. I don't think the sex and violence is not only not over the top. No, what I liked about it is that no lines were crossed. And Lance, you talked about how women told you about the sex and violence on the show.
No, they told me about the show full stop. It was always women that were recommending the show to me.
Well, that reminded me when I first saw the show when it was on DVD. I was a student at Montana State University, and I let a friend of mine who's a girl from Vietnam borrow it. So she saw the entire first season on DVD. So when she gave back to me, I asked her what she thought about it. She, in her thick Vietnamese accent, she said 2 words: very sexy. 2 words.
Me love the show long time. Okay.
Yeah, so she that was good. That's good.
It came into my head from that movie, Full Metal Jacket, innit?
Yeah. But I really can't say anything negative. Like I said,
that's fine. I'm gonna move on. No
lines were crossed, and it was good.
All right, okay. We're gonna move before we wrap up. We're gonna move on.
They cheer for blood, and this will have it.
Well, this section will be really short because Inside Man and History Bro don't have a favourite line of dialogue or favourite moment. No, they may do. I could be being unfair. Yeah, Blue, I'll start with you.
God. I think my favorite scene was on next episode 4 with the pits, because I was telling you when you called me, I know it's like bro would say about brutality, but just showing like how like gruesome and gory this episode was when the guy's cutting the guy's face off. I'm like, wow, that's
you got a screen grab of that section?
Actually, yeah, it's episode 4, so I'll pull it up a second.
Do you want to grab that while have a look for that while
dialogue?
Leroy, did you have a favorite moment between these 2 episodes or line of dialogue?
Believe it or not, and just for the record, before I say my favorite scene, I am a 100% straight guy. Okay, So my favorite
It's
scene.
really not necessary to say that, Leroy. But...
No, I'm just letting y'all know. My favorite scene was a scene that really freaked me out, and it was in episode 4 in the pits before Spartacus fought that woman who basically gave the promoter the bowl where Spartacus and the other gladiator would take things out. Soon as she turned around, she had something between her legs, which was her, you know what? That really freaked me out. And I say, believe it or not,
is that your favorite scene? The scene that freaks you out?
Yeah, I thought it was kind of funny. I thought it was kind of funny.
Okay, so it freaks you out, but you also thought it was funny. You're a strange guy, Leroy. Okay.
So what else is new? You didn't realize that about me, man?
Well, that's why I like having you on. Oh my god, yeah, this scene is it's a good job with the makeup, has to be said. That's a good makeup job.
Yeah, because he puts right here and just starts, and then he starts wearing it too. Then like his victim's faces. I'm like, whoa, dude, that's hardcore.
Texas chainsaw, Texas chainsaw stuff right there.
So, yeah, okay, yeah, that scene very, very memorable for sure.
Yeah.
In History Bro, did you have a favorite scene or moment at all? Something that made you you said you were mildly entertained. Tell me which scene mildly entertained you the most.
I don't know. I mean, for me, the thing that rescues this show is Spartacus. He's a good actor. His character is half decent, right? So I mean, that's the thing. I don't want to be too rude about it, but you know, like the Toxic Avenger films from the 80s.
Yeah,
where they're so shit that they're good, right?
The same company make that film called Surf Nazis Must Die.
Really?
I think they did, yeah.
Right.
Surf Nazis Must Die.
So yeah, the face pull-off thing was memorable, I suppose. It's stuck in mind. Incidentally, I think that's an extremely difficult operation. You don't just, you know how you can skin a rabbit by just turning it inside out and the skin comes off. You can't do that with a human face. It doesn't work like that.
Have
you don't
you
use
tried?
a hook. You don't use a hook and the face comes off. It doesn't work like that. Anyway, I thought the last scene of episode 4 where he's talking to Gladiators and he says, you know, my wife thinks you're cursed, and I think maybe you are, but you know, a deal's a deal. But again, it's actually getting towards something of any weight. So I think that's probably the best scene because it's actually two men talking about something slightly real, right, rather than comic book gore. So probably that scene.
Yeah. Plus, he says right there, I mean, a promise is a promise. You know, the thing is, you did save my life, and gods are not a debt. Demands repayment. He's a man of honor.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's driven partly by honor and partly by his view of Spartacus as a financial asset that he can't afford just to get rid of.
Plus, also, you want to make your main protagonist go through hell where you think they're at their lowest ebb and they're not going to come back and there's no way back from this, and then they come back from it, right? That's drama. That's what drama is. And so, you know, Spartacus is at his lowest ebb there, and he's probably just going to be executed, and then he gets a reprieve. It's a bit of a Deus Ex Machina, right? It's a bit of the gods just save you, like that.
So would you say that's something the show does well then?
Yeah. I mean, it's not bad. I'm starting to fear for Spartacus a bit. You know, where's he going to go from here?
Becoming emotionally engaged by episode 4, news at 11. Very good. Inside Man, do you have a favorite bit?
It really was the end, actually. But it just felt like it took us a long time to get there. You know, it took us 4 episodes to get to that moment. And it really just needed to take 2 episodes. I just think it's too drawn out, it's too stretched out. That was the best scene. I will just say something about the fight choreography. It's really good. I mean, it's excellent.
It is
fight
good.
choreography.
Finally, something we can agree on.
Really, really good. You know, I mean, it's brutal, it's savage, and and it looks yeah, it looks pretty, pretty, it is unrelenting. It's yeah, I've really, really admired the stunt guys and the fight coordinators in this. I think they've done a fantastic job.
Yeah, they put them through a really intense camp to get them into shape and to train.
Yeah, it was some kind of boot camp. I think you were saying last week.
No,
Yeah.
full on boot camp.
Lance,
There's on the behind the scenes DVD. There's loads of stuff about it.
Yeah.
and Lance, that's so sad about the death of Andy Whitfield.
Well, we are going to talk about that in detail, but not until we get to the end of the show.
Lance, one last thing, if I say, just add another positive line.
Yeah,
I do quite like the aesthetic. I was complaining about all the oiled up dudes and the ridiculous slow motion blood spurts and stuff. But obviously, it's taken from the aesthetic. Is taken from 300. I do like that aesthetic, right? It is quite good. So there's that as well.
Well, bro, that's also the funny part is when they're training, they're almost, like I said, oiled up and all pretty looking and too pretty to be like gladiators. The whole pit sequence, these guys are just grungy and just dirty, disgusting. Yeah. And just like the pit is like a whole, like the pit is almost like how the show, they should always look. These guys are like,
quite often you see sort of the sky or a sunset or something. It's like an otherworldly 300, like dream world almost, I quite like that look. I think that's a cool look. So
yeah. Well, I mean, you've got to go all in for that look. You can't be like half in with it and half out. This guy was kind of cool, actually. This character that ran the pits, wasn't he? The guy that ran the pits. I quite liked him, and he's got this sort of semi-Egyptian garb, which seemed quite cool. I don't know. In terms of my favorite dialogue is always between Spartacus and Peter Mensa's character,
Doctore,
yeah,
who is really Animaeus,
and their growing relationship I find is really endearing. This kind of it's got that real Jedi Padawan thing going on, as it should be in good writing. If we had a good Star Wars show. So,
I love Lance, like being like a good drill instructor, boot camp, slave owner. He pees on the ground. Neil, kicks him in his own urine. Like, oh damn it.
Yeah, you missed that actually inside Man as well. That one of the things, because I've been watching all the behind the scenes commentaries, and when they first did, when they did the first scene where quite a lot of them were naked, in between the takes, the actors that had got their junk out didn't want their bits to go small, so they all had like hot water bottles between their crotches. So there was all these like very buff, oily men sitting around everywhere, clutching a hot water bottle on their groin. Can you go back to that? There's that shot. No, of the compound, please. There's that shot, and there's another one earlier in the show, which gives you a slightly different angle looking down on Capua. And I really like the fact that they included these shots and give you a sense of how big the Ludus is roughly. The lower level is where all the gladiators are kept. This training courtyard is really all they get to see outside, with the exit facing a sheer cliff drop. And then the upper echelons and the main house, where all the delights and nice things happen. Yeah, and there's the town of Capua below it. So I like that, and the fact that they're up on the hill, and it suggests the dominance of the House of Batiatus. He's determined to dominate the city. You can see the gladiator ring in that shot. You can see the Colosseum of Capua in that shot.
Hey Lance, I found out something about Capua. Capua today is known as Calabria, or is the city of Calabria today.
Yeah, well, I showed it on last week. I got it up on Google Earth.
I wasn't there. My bad.
That's all right.
One quick thing to say. I mean, I don't know if any of you chaps. I think Inside Man said, if you have been to Campania, I've travelled the length and breadth of Campania myself. Despite there's supposed to be a drought in this narrative, it doesn't look like a desert. It's still extremely verdant and lush, Campania. But that's the thing. That's the aesthetic for this story, isn't it? It's like a dream state. So it doesn't really matter that Campania, even during a drought, would be much more verdant than that. But it's all right. I like the aesthetic.
This is the historical fiction bubble in which
it's way over the top, way exaggerated,
and you've got to commit to that. You've got to commit to that bubble. You can't break it. I think one of the things that this show is very good at doing is it does observe the rules of its own reality. The violence is quick and severe and brutal. The dichotomy and the rules between master and slave, and then the different levels of slave, are all very clearly marked. And when rules are broken, you have to pay. If someone speaks out of turn to the dominus or domina, they're going to be in for a rude awakening. So this show is very good at setting up for what it is, a believable bubble that we can buy into. That's what I like about it.
But there's something very, very important that you said earlier, Lance, and it's an extraordinarily important point that you made when you were talking.
I love it when I make extraordinarily important points inside Man, especially ones that I made earlier that I can't remember. Please remind me.
It was the fact that when we watch something like this, we know this is fiction. And as you were saying to Leroy about the first Spartacus, the Spartacus movie, these are really, a great springboard for us to start educating ourselves about the historical figures, about the time, these particular times, and whether they are historically accurate or not. They do give you that inspiration, that thirst. They start to, drip feed you little bits of information that that you are becoming more and more curious about, but they start to give you that thirst for the history of the time. A history that most of us should really learn more about. And I think that's why I think having History Bro on this is really a great move. I mean, because of the work that he does, I think, you
thank you.
No, I look, credit where it's due. And I've said it before. I've said it a few times, and I think it's absolutely, a fair thing to say, that credit where it's due, because you add a very, very important layer to these streams, a very, very important layer to these streams, as you did with the Band of Brothers and the Masters of the Air streams.
I second that.
Yeah, it's so important, and the more we know about history, the more, we know about ourselves and where we come from, what we were, and how not to repeat things of the past. Exactly. So
I second what Inside Man said about you, History Bro. Like I said, I consider myself a historian, but compared to you, I'm an amateur. Even though you did cross me on William Wallace, but that's for another time.
Well, I put in the private chat, Leroy, some content I did on Longshanks, talking about the real history and the sources on William Wallace.
I'm quite happy to put that in the main chat if you want.
Please do, head over to loadseats.com if you want a few hours of me talking about the career of Longshanks.
I'm very familiar with Edward of the Longshanks, because like I said,
we're all familiar with Patrick McGowan's portrayal, actually, which is probably one of the best things in the movie.
Yeah, after I saw Braveheart, I not only looked up William Wallace in this World War Encyclopedia, but also looked up Edward the Longshanks. I researched him, and like the reason why he was called the Longshanks because he was tall. He was like taller than most men in England at that time. He was like 6'3". William Wallace was pretty tall too. He was supposed to be like 6'7", 6'8". So
it's funny. My history teacher, I have a vague recollection of him saying that he was called Edward the Longshanks because he wore like particularly long socks pushed up into his pantaloons, which I'm sure was not true.
No. I just say it's not the Longshanks. It's just Longshanks. Yeah, Longshanks means long-legged. That's exactly. It's literally what that means. But of course, we all know that the problem with Scotland is that it's full of Scots.
Oh.
Just for the record,
mate, I wish we had Critical Drinker on here. Combat these lines of dialogue.
I've been to Scotland. I've been to the Wynn Wallace Memorial.
Same here. I've seen that embarrassing statue that was made
of Mel Gibson.
Yeah, the statue of Mel Gibson rather than of William Wallace, because as we know, the Hollywood portrayal is far more important than history.
But it goes back to what I said earlier, and what Angus McFadden said on talking about Spartacus, how there's not much reliable sources on the life of Spartacus. History was written by those who've hanged heroes. So what I've learned as a historian is that you can't take everything they say as for face value. You have to question everything they say.
That's
biased and unbiased.
This is the great film that you missed of the 80s from the Toxic Avenger period. Serve Nazis Must Die. It is a real movie that actually did happen. They even paid for adverts on Capital Radio. I remember the advert blaring out the radio when
someone mentioned Robot Jocks a few weeks ago. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember that movie. That was a good.
Someone mentioned Robot Jocks. Yeah.
Yeah, I had the producer of it on this channel.
Movies. Oh, of course, yeah.
Yeah, Charles Band.
It's a new age of combat.
Human beings, genetically engineered to be the best fighters in history.
Two champions.
It isn't over until someone wins.
At war with each other.
Achilles! I have already killed you.
Two invincible men.
Let's finish it, Alexander, here now.
The ultimate killing machines.
I'm gonna get in this thing, and I'm gonna kick your...
See, I'd love to see Trump and Putin square up in a pair of those. And
fire, Lance.
What's that?
That was
no politics.
Yeah. That was quick fire. I mentioned Robot Jocks, and 2-3 seconds later, you're like, boom, there's a Robot Jocks clip.
Yeah.
That was brilliant.
I interviewed Charles Band.
Did it go well?
Did it go brilliant. Well? He only had an hour, and I was on with Inside Man, and we packed as many questions into that hour as we could. I think we even kept him on for 5 extra minutes, but he had a production meeting. He's like Roger Corman. He's still chucking out movies now. He has said he will come back. So
I'll go back and watch that.
The main character just died this year.
What's that?
The main character from Robot Jocks, Gary Graham, I think was his name. He just died this year.
The actor.
Oh. Yeah.
I think he.
I remembered him from Alien Nation, the series.
That's right. Yeah.
Of course. Yeah.
I don't know what he died of, but he was young. He was only in his early 70s. He wasn't that old.
Well, early 70s is,
compared to how long people are.
Not what I would call young, but I will be calling it young when I'm in my early 70s. Of course, by the time I get there, it will be the new 50s, of course. But I didn't know we had Gary Graham, isn't it? I didn't know we'd lost him.
Yeah, he died, I think, back in February, around the same time Carl Weathers did.
Right. Yeah.
We're losing a lot of people this year.
Mate, we lose them. They're going every year. Yeah, he died in January. You're right. Oh, that's a real shame. He was very talented. He was on Star Trek Enterprise and a couple of other.
He guest starred on NCIS JAG. He guest starred on JAG.
Yeah, and lots of other stuff. He'd done quite a few roles on Star Trek, actually. Anyway, okay, we're gonna wrap it up now. So that's episodes 3 and 4. I'm going to talk more about Spartacus probably next Sunday, although there's going to be one Sunday in August that I can't do. I'm not sure if it's next week or the one after. I will let you know well before time. So but yeah, if we do a special on RoboJock's history, bro, obviously it would be good to get you on to talk about the great Russian-American robot battle of 2075.
I haven't seen Robot Jocks in years. I had it on VHS when I was a kid. Watched it 10 times whatever, but haven't seen it in yonks.
There's a special edition Blu-ray that's just come out, actually.
Oh, right. Okay.
And it's one of the things that Charles Band said about it was, what he likes about it compared to CGI is that's the only film of its type that has done stop motion effects for robot battles. You know, there are no others apart from a couple of others of his.
And Dave Allen, wasn't it? David Allen is animator.
Yeah, Dave Allen. Who that was the guy whose film he just completed as well, wasn't it? The
Primevals.
The Primevals, which we also talked about on the stream. Dropping soon is actually the latest Spartacus TV show, The House of Asher.
The House of Asher. I don't know how they're going to...
Nikki Tarabay as Asher.
I don't know how they're going to do that. I don't know how they're going to do that.
Well, I've heard conflicting information as to when it's set. Because his character die?
Yeah, his character dies at the end of Spartacus Vengeance, the third season.
Yeah, spoiler alert.
Maybe it kills him.
Double spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't seen that. But yeah, I have a feeling his story is going to be set prior to him arriving in the Ludus. Although
I was told it was an altered universe.
Oh, is it?
Yeah,
I don't like that, because that's like just, you might as well just retcon something then. But we'll see. I mean, they would be better off having it like it's his twin brother that we didn't know about or something, you know. But I don't know. Anyway, I reckon it'll be good though, because he is a good actor. He's one of the strongest actors in the show, in my view. And it'll be interesting to see what happens. Yeah, Darth Plato pointed out he was beheaded in the show, so unless it's set in the afterlife like that rejected Gladiator 2 script that we're not going to get to see. History Bro, what you got coming up?
On my quote-unquote show on lotuseaters.com, Epochs, I am going through the very, very end, the death of the Republic. So I'm just finishing up my 3-part series on the biography, the life of Cato the Younger. Just earlier today, part 2 of Cato the Younger came out, and next Sunday will be part 3. And then I'm going to be moving on to Pompey Magnus and then Caesar himself, and did Crassus in the last few weeks. So I'm also on the podcast of the Lotus Eaters at least once or twice a week. And then there's my own channel, History Bro, where there's just a couple of 100 videos about history, everything from Göbekli Tepe and the Assyrians through all of the ancient world, the medieval world, loads on the monarchs, the early and medieval monarchs of Great Britain, or England rather, and even some World War I, World War II stuff. I've even got a series all about the Watergate scandal and Richard Nixon, like a 5-part series on that. There's like an 18-part series on Mao Zedong and the Great Leap Forward and that unbelievable famine which cost tens of millions of lives in China. So there's lots there on History Bro, so you can check that out.
Blue Collar, what you got coming up?
Tomorrow, Lance, I'm going to watch Tucker and Dale versus Evil. It's been a long time since I watched that movie. So
I saw that at the cinema, I think.
Yeah. If you're not busy, hop on and trying to see who else is going to come on. We're still hashing out the details. And yeah, and tonight I'll watch, but tomorrow you and me are covering the finale. It's been 8 weeks, Lance, for House of the Dragon.
Yeah. Final episode of House of the Dragon.
Hey, time is flying by, guys. I mean, just think Band of Brothers we did, Masters of the Air. Now House of the Dragon's ending, Acolyte ended. Like, man, just this year is flying by.
It's going by too quickly for my liking.
I agree.
Yeah, far too quickly. And of course, we got the Nielsen ratings on Tuesday, which will be on. Yeah. So, Leroy, your books are out, of course.
Yes. This book is which I published in May. Is the first book of my new series called.
Oh, hang on. Let me enlarge you a second there. There you go. Hold it up a bit. There we go. That's good. That's good. Yeah.
It's the first book of my new series called Jonah Chamberlain Mountain Man. I published it back in May. I'm working on the second book right now. In fact, I just completed chapter 5 before I came on the podcast. And so I hope to complete that at the latest by mid-September at the latest.
Do you know, I completely misread the cover of that at first. I thought for a second it said Uber driver to freedom. But it says upriver
to freedom.
That could be a modern day sequel. Uber Driver 3.
And in fact, after we're done here, I'm gonna watch the new episode of Hotel Cocaine and the
is episode 8 out yet?
It should be. I'm about to watch it after I'm done here. And also I'm gonna watch the season finale of House of the Dragon season 2. What I like about House of the Dragon, I like the show itself better than all 8 seasons of Game of Thrones. I think it's better than all of that. So
it's certainly better than the last 2 seasons. I can't have an opinion on whether it's better than all of it until I've seen all seasons of House of Dragon, and I think we've got at least 2 more.
But
to come. And I don't think they should go beyond 5. I think 5 seasons will be enough for this.
I agree. I'm very excited. I'm very excited to see the season finale of House of the Dragon tonight. So other than that, like I said, my newest book, I hope at the latest, I hope to complete that at the latest by mid-September. I'm working on 2 series right now. One is the Frontier series, and the other is this one, Jonah Chamberlain. So after I'm done with this book, I plan on starting the 4th book in my Frontier series, and hopefully have that completed by the end of the year. So by the end of the year, I would have published 6 books. I already published 4 already.
All right, very good. Inside Man. Anything else? Anything you want to plug?
Yeah, well, I have got 3 very, very interesting films to talk about with you guys on Tuesday.
Fantastic.
One of them is an amazing giallo movie. The other is a spaghetti western with one of the best title sequences I've ever seen. And the other is probably the most important blaxploitation movie ever made.
Which is what's the spaghetti western?
The spaghetti western is Day of Anger.
Never heard of it.
With Lee Van Cleef.
I have heard of it.
It's got an amazing title sequence.
1967.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. This is I know exactly. I remember this film because he's got that shotgun, hasn't he?
Yeah, and
in the movie, as well as his pistol.
Yeah, it's got a special pistol.
Yeah, which has got that extra it's got that extra barrel and everything. Yeah, I do remember this film. Enjoyed it as a kid. Haven't seen it since, so I'll see if I can watch it before.
Brilliant soundtrack. Absolutely superb soundtrack to it. But like I say, one of the best title sequences to any movie. And I'm quite big on my title sequences.
Yeah, me too.
Yes, beautiful title sequence. And yeah, as I say, one of the best giallo movies ever made as well. I won't say what one that is, and like I say, the other one is probably the most important. It's certainly, in my view, the most important blaxploitation movie ever made. So I'll surprise you on that.
We'll look forward to it. Beverly Hills Cop 1, possibly. So I'm interviewing Lawrence Monason on Wednesday at 9 p.m. No, hang on, 10 p.m. 10 p.m. UK time. He's an actor that's appeared in many films and television shows, including Murder, She Wrote, Star Trek Enterprise. I think he did one other Star Trek show as well. Was in the movie And the Band Played On, but was also in the film Mask with Eric Stoltz. Played Eric Stoltz's best friend in the film Mask. And he's been out of the acting game for a few years and is just going back into it. So, and he's more than willing to talk about why he got out of it, which is, I think, so it's going to be a very interesting and quite heartfelt interview. 2 hours or 3 hours before I'm interviewing Lawrence, I've got another interview on the same night. I'm interviewing Valentin, games designer of Hex of Steel, which is the game that you'll occasionally see me play on my channel. It's a World War II sandbox kind of game with historical scenarios. I've just been playing the invasion of Russia in 1943, and I've just had to complain about the excessive amount of German paratroopers that appear to be at the AI German paratroopers players' disposal. He's dropping like, you know, the equivalent of like 9 divisions of paratroopers every turn behind my advancing Russians, and I'm getting very upset about this, and just did a big whinge on Discord about how that was completely unrealistic and it would never happen, and it's the AI's proper messing with my stratagem. So you know, I've been told that apparently there's a way I can limit this, so I'll be getting into that with him on Tuesday. Then, of course, next month, and I can't believe I'm saying next month already, in the context of next month being September. We're now in August. July, come back. All is forgiven. Please don't move through our lives so quickly. But on the 25th of September, I have Galen Hurd coming on. Legendary Hollywood producer, produced films Aliens, Terminator, Terminator 2, the entire Walking Dead franchise, Tremors, Dante's Peak, the list goes on. So there's a whole load of stuff to get into with Gail. I've only got a strict 60 minutes with Gail, so it's going to be a very tightly compressed interview, and I'm going to try and pack in as many questions as I can. I'm actually going to spend very little time talking about her early stuff, Terminator, Terminator 2, Aliens, The Abyss, because she's been doing the rounds of Terminator anniversary screenings, and you know, every question that could be asked about Terminator and Terminator 2 has been asked of Gail, and I don't want to be asking the same questions, so I'm making sure that I view and watch every interview she's ever done, so that I can cover them. But mine is the only YouTube channel that Gail's ever been on. She's already been on my channel once as a guest on another interview, surprise guest, and so she has done one other podcast, but that was after she first appeared on my channel. So I feel very honoured that Gail's coming on, and we've had to schedule it for right at the end of September. That's how far in advance I had to book her, and there'll be lots of other guests between now and then, because I'm currently at 72 interviews and I want to get to 100 by New Year's Day. So
you're a busy man, Lance.
Try and fit a load of them in. And it has been suggested to me by one of my channel's followers that I should be interview 100. I don't know if that, I'm not sure how I feel about that. That feels a bit egotistical, but that's the recommendation of Gary from the Outcasts Creative Australia. He says I should be interview 100. So there you go. Start writing out your questions for me now. Fantastic. All right. Well, just remains for me to thank my guests. Don't forget to like and subscribe to those who have channels, Blue Collar Loser, Inside Man, and History Bro. Check out Leroy's books on Amazon. Do go to the Lotus Eaters. Loads of amazing historical content there. Also, History Bro's done a fantastic video on the assassination of Robert Kennedy, which I got to watch last week.
John Kennedy.
History Bro and I are doing a special on JFK on the 22nd of November. We're also doing a special on the Battle of Britain on the 15th of September, which is the anniversary of the height of the Battle of Britain.
Oh, yeah,
so
I've forgotten about that.
Oh,
Thanks for reminding me.
I'm reminding you now. So
Okay,
I'm brushing up on both of those topics because, and I agree with everything you said in that video, by the way, History Pro.
Well, the JFK one?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, cool,
Agree 100% with everything you said about who was probably responsible and why.
Again, like I say, I could drone on for a long time about it, so I'm looking forward to that one, Lance.
Well, I'll schedule 3 hours for us. So thanks very much for everyone tuning in. Thanks for the comments in the chat, particularly from Darth Plato, who's been inundating us with lots of historical, useful minutiae there.
Yeah, good comments.
Do appreciate the input from you all. And don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll be back tomorrow for House of Dragon, I think at 11 p.m. UK time. Until then, take care.